My Bigfoot sighting happened in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in 1977 or 78 in October. I was spending a weekend with my father, his brother, and my grandfather at their hunting camp in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Northern Marquette County. That morning, which was a Sunday morning, we woke up to a beautiful sunny morning. And the leaves were full in color, and it was beautiful out. We were at the cabin to cut wood for the following deer season and winter time, as we spent quite a bit there during the winter. I asked my father that morning after breakfast if I could take a walk before we started cutting wood. I would have been 15 or 16 at the time, and Dad said, yes, you can, but you need to be back here in 2 hours to help us cut wood. So I said, great. So I put on my orange hat and grabbed my pump shotgun, and I started walking. There's an area of my dad's property we call the Big Ravine. And it's one of the locations when I was a boy that I used to love to walk up. The hills are very tall, the trees are very tall. And my Uncle Charlie had a seat up there for deer season. I used to love just to sit and look down the ravine and look at the hills. I made it up to the ravine in about 25 minutes, and I sat in Charlie's seat. And as I was sitting there, I could hear something coming. And I turned around, and I was like, what is that coming? And it's a fox. There's a fox running flat out right straight at me. And it's very strange because there wasn't anybody around but me. All the guys were back at the cabin, which was a half a mile away. And it was odd to me to have a fox running straight toward me. I didn't harm the fox. I had no interest in it. I was just in awe of how fast he would run. And I was wondering what had scared him up. I found out a short time later. After a period of time, I stood back up and I walked back out of the woods and down the road to our hunting camp. And then I decided that I wanted to go check a bear bait station I had set up in another part of the property where I had been putting fish scraps out in a pail. And I had the pail hung between two trees. So off I went. It was probably close to 3/4 of a mile walk to the bait station. And as I was walking, the leaves were dampening from the sun. And it was very quiet walking. And I made it down the road and where I needed to turn the trail into the woods. I knew our property very well from walking it many times with my dad and my grandpa. And at that time, I had no fear in the world. I had my shotgun. And everything was right for me. I started walking through the sugar maple trees, which are all yellow and just gorgeous, heading to an area that had a small knoll on it where I had this bait station. And I was walking through the woods. I could look at where the pail normally would be hanging from the tree, and it was down. I couldn't see it. So I knew that a bear had been there and had pulled it down, snapped the rope and pulled it down, which was what I wanted by design. So I was walking very quietly, and I had the wind in my face, and I walked up on the knoll. And in front of me, about 50 feet, is this large, hairy animal, very dark in color, not quite black. Its butt was facing me, and its head was facing away. I was about 50 feet away. And I stood there just looking at this thing, thinking, that's a really big bear. It was on all fours down towards the ground. I'm sure it was eating whatever was left of the fish that it had pulled out of the pail. And I stood there for a while, and I could smell it, and it really stunk. And it didn't know I was there. A couple of times it looked up, but it couldn't smell me. It had no idea I was there. It was been so quiet walking. All of a sudden, it picked its head up and was looking around straight away from me. And I thought, that is a funny shaped head for a bear. It's kind of conical shaped. I've seen a lot of bear when I was a boy growing in the Upper Peninsula. Thought that is really strange. I wasn't afraid at all. And it put its head down and picked its head up one more time. And I got a good look at it from the behind. It never faced me. It was away from me. And all I could see was his backside and kind of the back of his head as he picked it up and a little bit of the side. And all of a sudden it took off running. It ran on all fours. And I remember thinking that this bear ran a lot like this chimpanzee on a TV series I used to watch called Doc Tari. He ran like Cheetah. That was the name of the chimpanzee. I thought, I don't get this. That is weird. Is this animal injured? And it ran, and I stood there just watching until I couldn't see it anymore in the stand of hardwood I was in, and I couldn't hear it anymore. So I kind of shrugged my shoulders, and I didn't smell it anymore. And I thought, well, it's time for me to get back, or Dad's not going to be happy if I don't get there when he asks me to. So I turned around, and I started walking back out to a logging road that I wanted to take back to the cabin. About halfway between where I'd seen this creature and the road, I could hear something walking off to my left side. It would walk when I would walk. It stopped when I stopped. This went on until I got out to the logging road. And I looked down the road, I looked the other way, didn't hear anything. I turned and started walking towards the cabin. And I could hear something walking to my left a little behind me, and the same thing happened. It would walk when I would walk. It would stop when I would stop. I continued walking for probably another 300 or 400 feet, maybe 5. And then I heard a chainsaw start up at the cabin, which was probably my dad starting it up and telling me to get back. So it followed me a little bit more, and the chainsaw started again. I didn't hear it anymore. So I continued to walk back to camp, looking to my left, trying to see what I could see, and I never did see it. I got back to the cabin, and in the yard was my father, his brother, and a couple of our friends that hunted with us. All these guys were World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam vets. Were big men, big, tall men, and had fear of nothing, which was always very comforting to me as I was growing up. I was just a skinny teenage boy. And Dad had asked what I saw, and I told him what had happened. The fox running, this animal that I saw by the bait, it ran funny. And all the guys were listening to me very intently, but didn't say really anything. I'm thinking they probably thought, well, this is a teenage boy with a wild imagination. But I know what I saw, and I told them that. I know what I saw. And our weekend went on from there. We didn't talk about it anymore. I had forgotten about it through life until about 7 or 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And my father, who's now quite elderly, but back then he would take walks. And he had told us a story about him walking down one of the ridges at our cabin. And he stopped and he heard what he said was a bear bellowing. Black bear don't bellow. They don't really make any noise unless they're in a fight or it's a sow calling her cubs. But he would say, yeah, I heard a bear bellow the other day. And so I didn't ask him any more questions about it, but I logged it in the back of my mind, and it reminded me of that day back in 1977 or 78 in October when I saw this animal. Again, that went out of my head for many, many, many years until I came on a couple of Bigfoot YouTube channels, including yours, Vic, where people were talking about what they saw. And it all came rushing back to me. Came back that day, what I saw, what I smelled, what I heard, this creature following me. And then years later, my father talking about this bear bellowing. And again, they don't do that. They're silent. They don't make any noise. So I often wonder what I saw. If it was a Bigfoot, it was not a bear. It didn't run like a dog. It ran like a monkey. It was big. It was smelly. And all these things started adding up for me as I'm watching these YouTubes, again, Vic, including yours, and I made up my mind that I needed to talk to somebody about this. I haven't been hiding it, but it really just went in the back of my head until the last couple of years after listening to a significant amount of testimony on YouTube about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or what have you. And I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. I never got a frontal view of it. It was only from the back. It ran on all fours. It was very big, very hairy, smelled, and had this funny gait. And I welcome anybody's discussion on this. That's about the end of the story, if you will. And I will tell you, I'll never forget about it for the rest of my life.